Manny's, where are we? March 13th, 2023. The cops asked the chief if they had 300 lateral transfers. Asked another cop, and he admitted there were over 100. Nobody seems to know. Asked him what the screening process was that lateral goes through as opposed to a cadet. They don't know. They're hiring killers. They're hiring killers, they're hiring thugs. They've been doing it for years because they don't have to run through a normal screening process or go through the police academy. Well, they have an abbreviated police academy course for them. Not much. Here we are at Manny's. These are the people that come out to see cops.
I hear something about what's going to happen to electric hearing, like, is it good? Like, where's my new stuff?
Good show of brass, though. I didn't expect the chief to be here. They usually don't invite him. I mean, Manny's would invite him, but the POA won't. I'm going to shut up and just watch people.
There's a bunch here in California. You might not even know it. Alameda, the city of Alameda.
They're painting my building across the street. That is a lot of building.
Depends. We really started in earnest in 2019. 6 years.
So I don't know that just swapping out.
Yeah, that's
Planking.
You afraid of a camera? You want it for something somewhere? Give it a slow see what's up here. Manny himself. Hey Dorsey, get a job.
How are you doing?
I heard you got a job.
I did.
Congratulations. I know him. I don't know him.
He's run for supervisor in many.
No. Introduce me to somebody important.
What's that?
Introduce me to somebody important.
You are important. He was one of the best. He ran against Gavin Newsom.
No. I said introduce me to somebody important.
Okay.
I'm fucking with you. You know me.
Yeah.
It's good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Hey Barba. Ask them how many lateral transfers they have. They admitted to 300. They hire people who kill people in other districts.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Ask them how many lateral transfers they have. You got it in you? They admit to 300. Have you got those stars on Velcro yet?
They're always on Velcro.
How many ups and downs have you been? You're the most consistent member of the command staff for at least 10 years.
Yes. Well,
And Angela introduced me to you 20 years ago when you were a commander.
I was a commander in 2010.
What did you go, right from patrolman to commander?
No, I hit every rank along the way. I'm in my 33rd year.
Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
When we're in for Saturn cycle, the Saturn cycle takes around about 29 minutes.
Duarte, star number 1433.
I don't need your name.
Very good, sir.
Do we want Ariana or do we want, what do you think, Chief Scott? Do you know this song?
I don't know the words.
You don't know this song? Where have you been? This is the Mariah Carey remix. We're going to start in a minute. I just need to get water for my panelists, okay? In the meantime, it's yes and, okay? This is important.
You the only member of the commission here? Oh yeah. I didn't recognize you with his clothes on.
But his clothes on or your clothes on?
I fuck around with everybody, Deborah, you know that.
Okay, we're gonna get this started, Julie, yes? Okay. Welcome to Manny's. Thank you so much for being here. Oh my god, I don't wanna light the chief on fire, so we're gonna...
A lot of cops in the room.
There are a lot of cops. I have a permit for this, but we're gonna move it over here. Okay, my job right now is to welcome everyone, I think. Yes, hi, welcome. This is our 17 millionth SF Standard live event. I think it's the third of the year though, and we're really honored to do this partnership with the SF Standard. We have the editor-in-chief here, Julie. Amazing. This is our second event of the evening. The first one we did was with the SFPUC on where all of our electricity comes from. So we're going, it's a natural progression from where does our electricity come from to the state of policing. I want to thank a couple folks. Felipe was working in the front, right? Thanks to Felipe, who served you your drinks this evening. He's amazing. Louise, our events manager here. And I guess what I just want to say is I know that policing is a very, very intense subject for a lot of people. And I bet everyone in this room has a different opinion or perspective on what policing should or should not be. Probably from there should be no police to we want a ton more police. Know that there are people around you that might have very different opinions about this issue for you. And I'm actually really proud that this panel represents a diversity of perspectives on the issue as well. That's what this place is about. Manny's is about having respectful, civil, constructive conversations about some of the toughest issues that affect us. And we all know that criminal justice and policing is one of those. So I fully expect tonight to continue in that tradition. There'll be an opportunity for questions, I think, after the panel. I'm not sure. But I thank you for allowing this conversation to happen in a way that makes us all look good. And I hope it is substantive, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. So with that, I think I'm going to give it to Michael, who has his own mic, and it was Yes and the Mariah Carey remix. Goodbye.
Thanks for that, Manny. Thank you all so much for joining us. You know, we had some last-minute changes to the lineup, so I'm very happy that Chief Scott can join us tonight, as well as Commissioner Kevin Benedicto for the Police Commission. My name is Michael Barba. I'm a reporter with the San Francisco Standard. So we're also joined here tonight by Yoel Haile, who is the Northern California, hold on one second, he is the director of the Criminal Justice Program at the ACLU Northern California. His work focuses on issues including mass incarceration, criminalization, reducing police abuse, and rectifying laws, police policies and practices that target and disproportionately harm minority and marginalized communities. As I said, Commissioner Benedicto, he's a member of the Police Commission. He has been practicing law in the city since 2015 as both a civil litigator and as a civil rights attorney. And he's also served on the Bar Association of San Francisco's Criminal Justice Task Force. Supervisor Matt Dorsey, Supervisor Dorsey represents District 6, which consists of Soma, Mission Bay, East Cut, and Treasure Island. He previously worked as Communications Director for SFPD with Chief Scott, and also was with the City Attorney's Office for more than a decade, working with Dennis Ritter. Chief Scott, please, no introduction, one of the longest serving police chiefs in San Francisco history, I believe. So with that, we are here to debrief the election and to talk about what it means for the future of policing in San Francisco and also just public safety generally as well. I think the biggest talker is probably going to be Prop E, which passed last Tuesday with a margin of 54 to 46% at last count. The measure was put on the ballot by Mayor Breed. It does a lot of different things, so forgive me if I miss some of them. One of the things it does is it seeks to authorize the police department to use drones. It would relax, or it does relax the rules for when officers can chase suspects in vehicle pursuits. And it's also going to make it so that the police commission will have to hold a public meeting at every police station in the city before changing SFPD policy. So Mayor Breed's idea with this is to improve public safety, but obviously there's also a lot of concerns about it, which we'll hear more about tonight, I'm sure. Those include, you know, whether this will lead to more crashes during police pursuits. Prop E attracted huge amounts of campaign money with more than $1.6 million in support from wealthy investors, including Chris Larson and Ron Conway. And the police union, I think, also gave some money as well to support it, San Francisco Police Officers Association, while the ACLU spent big to oppose it. The other measure we're going to be talking about is Prop B, which started in Supervisor Dorsey, and Prop B would have established a minimum staffing level for SFPD contingent on a future tax increase. That was rejected ultimately after tons of money was spent against it as well, and Supervisor Dorsey and other opponents labeled it a cop tax. And lastly, and less directly related to policing, but also related to just a crisis in the city, is Prop F, which is another measure that was backed by Mayor Breed, which starting next January will require thousands of welfare recipients to undergo drug screening and enter into treatment if they're found to be using illicit substances. Or if they don't, they will risk losing their cash, basically. So I think with that, there was a lot there, but I did just want to start with Chief Scott. And Chief, what do you expect we'll see first in terms of property? How quickly will these changes roll out? In terms of drones, chases, what's the first on your to-do list?
So I expect that, can you all hear me? Yeah, I expect that the first implementation, the first phase of this will be some of the mandated policy revisions. And we've already started to work with the commission on that. That is the basis for what is to follow. For instance, there mentioned pursuit policy. There are mandated changes to the use of force policy. There are changes to our, basically the framework of our written directives, which is our General Order 3.01. And then there's two others, citation and arrest and then the detention policy. So we're gonna start there. And the implementation team basically has formed out every component of this proposition once it passed, but you have to start with those policies because I think that's the one that's really the one that's right in front of us. So again, I already started the commission and I think Commissioner Benedicto and President Elias, we've already started those conversations to start rolling some of these things out. And some of the mandates, we want to be very surgical about some of these mandates. We do feel like our policies are good policies. The way I'm viewing this and the way we're viewing this is that driving efficiency and driving effectiveness, and that's what we're trying to get to. The voters are voted for, and we need to be as efficient and effective as we can with the way we police and what we do in terms of how we change these policies. Our values are still there. I want to be clear about that. Our values are still there.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask was, did you think that the department's police pursuit policy needed to be changed? Was it in need of an update? Was there anything about it that was a problem?
So our policy was very restrictive, and it was meant to be restrictive. The one thing I will say, though, we do get a lot of feedback, negative feedback, when somebody's victimized, and I'll give you a couple of examples, particularly burglaries. Somebody's residence or business just got burglarized, the person is driving away, and the victim is like, well, how come you're not chasing? And that.
Can we give him a microphone?
This one's not working at all.
Yep. So in that situation, let me say that again just real quickly. So burglaries, which as the policy exists right now, that type of crime, felony or not, officers can't go in pursuit unless there's some other factors that indicate that there's some ongoing danger to the public. And that's one that gets complained about quite often. We've had many situations where a person sees a burglary happen, they see the suspect, they call us, we get there, and the people jump in the car and they drive off. And for that person to tell that person, sorry, we really we can't pursue that person. It's a source of frustration. So,
but officers can, right?
In that situation, no. In that situation that I just gave, no. So this broadens the categories of what types of crimes can be pursued. But really what it's going to amount to is our management of the pursuit. I believe our supervisors do a good job in calling out pursuits, even with violent crimes. Sometimes it's just too dangerous. And as a supervisor, as the person responsible for monitoring that pursuit, there are very few circumstances where you are going to put innocent bystanders in danger like that. For instance, let's say it's a robbery and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, school's letting out and there's kids everywhere, and the pursuit goes through that district. 9 out of 10 times, probably 10 out of 10 times, an SFPD supervisor will probably call that pursuit, and we call it 22, but they would probably terminate that pursuit because it just gets to be too risky to the public. That still exists.
Right.
And will still exist when this policy changes.
So my colleague and I did some reporting. We actually got the data from the entire state of California on police pursuits, and we found out that SFPD has a relatively high percentage of pursuits that result in crashes. it was nearly twice the statewide average at 41% of pursuits, resulting in a crash. And I know one of the concerns that the ACLU had about the measure with it was that this could potentially lead to more crashes. So I was wondering, you all, if maybe you could just talk a little bit more about that in particular, but also your concerns about the measure.
Sure. Then thank you everyone for coming for this important discussion. So I think the things that I find alarming are, for instance, this is one of the densest cities in the country, right? And if you're going to engage in high-speed vehicle chases, it is very likely that you're going to injure an innocent bystander, you're going to injure the officers themselves. The risk to the public is very high, even with the current policy that says officers are allowed to pursue if there's a violent crime, which is like specified in the California Penal Code, and it says it's these following crimes, right? But even with the example that the chief is giving, right? Burglary, as you were saying, if it has certain elements, it can be a violent crime, if I'm not mistaken. And in those instances, they can engage in a pursuit if it's appropriate, right? But let's assume that like it's a burglary that does not fall in the category of violent crime. Prop E could have said it can expand it to serious felonies, right? Which burglary certainly can be and is most of the time. It could have said it would expand vehicle pursuits to just felonies, but it didn't. What Prop E says is that officers can engage and are authorized to engage in high-speed vehicle pursuits for all felonies, and they say violent misdemeanors, but that is not a category of crime that exists in the Penal Code. There's nothing in the California Penal Code that says, here's a list of things that are considered violent misdemeanors. For violent felonies, there is. Like, it's a clear list, you can follow it. If you don't follow it, you're outside of policy. There is no such thing that exists like that for misdemeanors. So effectively what Prop E says is that cops can engage in these chases for any crime. Someone can steal $10 worth of food from anywhere, and if the individual supervisor feels that's appropriate to engage in that chase, they have the authority to engage. That's the fundamental problem with Prop E, is that it's not actually offering a serious solution to the set of serious problems that we as a city have, but it is providing a broad authority for cops to do many things that are very, very dangerous to residents and for the officers themselves.
Chief, very briefly, did you want to respond?
Yeah, just very briefly. So I disagree with that last example, because even under, at least under my interpretation and our interpretation, it would not allow for pursuit in that situation. The $10 shoplift, it probably excludes that type of crime. So absent any other factors, that would not be eligible for pursuit. And again, it's pursuits are dangerous. Just make
Do you
mistake
think
about
that
it.
the new pursuit policy is going to lead to more crashes?
Potentially, it could. I mean, I definitely can't rule that out. Pursuits, there's a risk when there's a pursuit. So
and more pursuits as well, also.
It could potentially, yeah. I think the whole issue for us is control and management of pursuits, and there is currently a lot of emphasis put on that, and there will continue to be a lot of emphasis put on management of the pursuit. If it's not worth the risk, the pursuit needs to be canceled.
Commissioner Benedicto, one of the other big parts of Prop E is the police commission and the changes that it will make to your process. So why do you think that the police commission has sort of become a lightning rod recently for so much criticism in San Francisco and people who are fearful of the state of public safety in the city? Why do you think that is?
I think it's because it's an election year and it's politically expedient. The police commission is composed of 7 volunteers. We have another one of my fellow commissioners here that work closely with the department. I think that people in the city have very real public safety concerns, and those need to be addressed in a comprehensive way. Everyone should feel safe in a place we all call home. And it's a convenient scapegoat when it isn't going right, that to point the blame at the police commission, which does not control operations of the department. It does not control deployment of officers. And so I think the answer is that it's politically expedient. I think that the answer is that you need someone to blame when it's a tight election, and that's the reality that we're in.
So you would say that the criticism isn't fair, that the commission has gone too far. I mean, Mayor London Breed in particular has singled out the police commission and said that the commission is getting in officers' ways, doing their jobs. It's gone too far. It's driven by reform and not public safety.
Yeah, I strongly disagree with that characterization of the commission having gone too far or being driven by ideologues. I've worked with Supervisor Dorsey and with the chief for a number of years. I'd like to think that neither of them consider me an out-of-control ideologue. But I'd also note that one of the examples, let's say, of the commission having gone too far is the pursuit policy. That pursuit policy was passed unanimously in 2013, drafted by the department, and approved by a totally different commission. So the characterization that we've gone too far in restricting pursuits is at odds with basic reality and the flow of time, in that it was 2013 and a different commission and passed unanimously. A recent, I believe it was a Mission Local, sorry to plug a competing paper, did an analysis and showed that 90% of our votes are unanimous. And in addition to that, every single policy that the commission passes, even the ones that aren't unanimous, are done in consultation with the department. The vast majority of our policies, upwards of 90%, are drafted by the department in the first instance, and the commission makes minor edits, if any, at the very end of that process. And even ones where the commission initiates, which are very rare, the department is involved at every stage of the policy development process. We don't have policy staff. We're not writing policies. We're not equipped to do that. And so we rely heavily on the department. So I think that when you look at those facts, they just don't square with this view that we're drafting all these policies in the middle of the night and are driven by nothing but ideology. It's just not consistent with reality.
Supervisor Dorsey, do you think that Commissioner Benedicto is an ideologue?
But I do think there have been some high-profile ideologues on the police commission in recent years, and I would say that the police commission, at least at times, has made itself a politically salient target. I don't think voters would have responded on this the way that they did if there weren't some truth in that. I know that it played out a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't even play out so much in policy as it does in just hearings and pronouncements, things that come before the commission. One of the issues that was important to me was when the police department was being grilled about the value of arresting drug dealers. And I represent a district where that's a very serious issue. In large part, it's the reason I asked voters, or the mayor and then voters, to be on the board of supervisors. I think there is, in many ways, a tone deafness on some of the really key flashpoint issues where the police commission isn't where voters are. So when the mayor went to voters with something and said, listen, we're gonna have some accountability for the police commission, it wasn't that hard to sell. It was, from my perspective, the benefit, I think the surveillance technology was really the main benefit of Prop E and why I was happy to support it. But I don't think it's, I said when I debated, actually it was here, Prop E, I don't think it is as bad as the critics say it is, but it's not the panacea that it's, some of its folks. I don't think we're gonna have a bunch of Steve McQueens running all over city, San Francisco, and I don't think it's gonna be that bad. But it's also incremental. I don't know that it's gonna change everything overnight.
Yoel, I'm curious what you think the passage of Prop E says about the mood on public safety in San Francisco.
I think if we're really going to be honest and truthful, right, it's important to acknowledge that all of us have high levels of frustration with crimes and the lack of real solutions to the crimes that a lot of us have experienced. My car has been broken into. My sister's car has been broken into like 3 times. My cousin's car has gotten stolen like right from the Hyatt Regency, a couple from Embarcadero BART station, in the middle of his workday, right? And many of us have experienced very different levels of crimes, and those are real. And the frustration that not enough is being done about these things, it's a real feeling, and it's a real thing that exists. I think what we find shameful in this whole discussion, not this particular discussion, but this whole discussion about public safety, is that when we're talking about what will actually solve these problems, what what politicians and various the people who funded Prop E are proposing to the public are a set of things that actually don't solve the problems we're facing, right? If you look at the San Francisco jail right now, 35% of the people in jail are unhoused. 75 to 80% of the people in jail have real mental health diagnosed problems. These are the people SFPD is arresting, sending to the jail, and at some point, the DA is charging, right? These are the people who are committing some of these crimes that we're all experiencing. So the question has to become, if someone has like a diagnosed mental health issue and is committing crimes as a result of that, how is increasing surveillance, increasing police chases, solving that problem, right? If someone is unhoused, how is it that the things that are enumerated in Prop E or Prop F actually solving the housing problem? It doesn't, right? And what I find frustrating about this whole thing is that there are real problems where we can have serious adult conversations about what are the problems and what are the appropriate solutions to address the root causes, prevent crimes from happening in the first place, and when they do happen, to have the appropriate interventions so they don't happen again. But what we're being offered with are things that will make things much worse and that don't actually touch these things that we're just talking about.
Supervisor Dorsey, I believe you supported Prop F, correct? Why do you think that needy people who depend on these welfare subsidies to get by should have to be subjected to drug screening to get cash?
I don't think there is any harm in assessing people for substance use disorders and offering treatment and incentivizing it in coercive ways, if necessary. I feel that we should be doing everything we can to incentivize and support people who are struggling with addiction, and do everything we can to incentivize and support recovery. In many ways, this is the issue that was more personal for me as somebody who's also in recovery from addiction. I think sometimes we can fall prey into thinking that policies that are enabling behavior that right now is deadlier than ever before. Fentanyl has really changed the conversation around what we're experiencing as a city. I would also agree, this isn't a panacea, and I don't think these issues are going to lend themselves to any kind of panacea. But I think the analysis should be, are we going in the right direction?
But how does it help? Because, I mean, I think the criticism is that if you take money away from folks who are already struggling, it's only going to push them further into homelessness, criminality, these other cycles.
One way that it would help is, I think it would put San Francisco on a more level playing field with other counties. What we're going to be doing with Proposition F is similar to what Los Angeles does. And one of the phenomena that plays out is that San Francisco does, we know, at some level, become a destination city for drug-related behavior. I've actually asked the city controller to do a known address history report. We often debate what the numbers and what the percentages are. I do feel strongly, though, that this is something that I think will put people into a situation where they're being assessed for substance use disorder that they may not have been assessed for otherwise. We should also remember that this is many of the features of this disease are that it tells you don't have a disease. So I do think just exposing people to these assessments and offering services. There's also a part of me that as somebody who's now an elected official within city government, I think it now gives us the ability on the Board of Supervisors to really push harder to make sure that we are living up to the commitments we made to be a treatment on demand city. So now that we're going to be assessing and we're going to be seeing numbers, I hope this now creates more of an onus for us to do more, to hire more people and make sure that we're providing opportunities for treatment. And then the other thing too that I felt about Prop F is there is enough of, I don't think it's so coercive that it's going to hurt people. I was satisfied that there is enough of an ability for the city to give people extensions and to work with people where they're at in a way that's coercive but not punitive.
Chief Scott, since we're talking about the drug crisis, I was wondering if I might be able to get you to reflect for us. Do I have right, in the early 90s you were a LAPD officer, right? During the crack cocaine epidemic. I was wondering if you might be able to think back to how the department handled the drug crisis then, and how that might be different from what your department is doing now, and if there's any sort of mistakes that you saw back then that you're trying not to repeat.
Yeah, so looking back earlier in my career, I mean, as a patrol officer, you don't know kind of what is happening in the executive level of the department. You're just told to go out and impact that block. But I can say this, just knowing what I know now and this journey over the last 30 years, there was, at least in early in my career, there was very little collaboration of trying to pull all the necessary pieces together. And I think some valid points have been made across the board here about what the root causes are. But at the end of the day, when it comes to a police officer that's being told, hey, you got rampant drug use, drug sales on this block, go clean it up, you're going to be asked to go out there and do what you do as a police officer, and that is, make an arrest and enforce the law. The thing is, we have to have all those other components at the table and working together, because as I see it now, yeah, you can leverage the criminal justice system maybe to get some of these services and to get people off the streets, to get some of the housing, at least get that process started. And that's what we're trying to do here in this city. This configuration that we have now, everybody's at the table. And I agree, housing is a problem. People not being stable in their housing needs. But we can't take an approach where we just say, okay, because somebody's unhoused, then we just throw our hands up and walk away. Back then with the crack epidemic, the other thing was you didn't have people necessarily dying from the drug itself. I'm not saying there weren't overdoses, because there were. Then there was the level of violence associated with crack was what was killing people. And we're not seeing that in our city so much. We do have some crime related to, violent crime related to drug sales and drug usage, but not like it was in the 90s. So it's the drug that's killing people. And the toxicity of fentanyl is killing people. So I think it has changed the game for us. So things are much different. And the other thing with, even in San Francisco, and I've talked to enough people and read enough of the history of the city back in the 90s, a lot of what was happening was local. It was local people, local cliques in the neighborhood. That's easier to deal with. We have a transitory population that rolls in, they sell, a transitory population that uses. We're not necessarily dealing with the kids from a neighborhood, which there's not an infinite supply in a neighborhood. You get a sale of people that are selling drugs and they grew up in a neighborhood, and once you can address that differently, because there's an end game. When you have just a constant flow of people coming into the city, and most of the people that we arrest turn out to be not San Franciscans, not from San Francisco, so it's a different ballgame, and that's something that we have to deal with as well.
I think something that Chief said that I want to reflect on is talking about how, with the crack cocaine epidemic, it was violence. And so when it's something like violence that you're dealing with, then something like arrests can be a useful metric for how you're dealing with it. But when you're seeing overdose deaths that are not being caused by violence, and arrests, I don't think are a helpful way to view it. There's a common saying in the law that when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So it's hard when you're in the position of the chief or even on the commission, where we're limited in our policy outcomes. But I think if we want comprehensive public safety, if we want a comprehensive response to the drug epidemic, we have to start by asking ourselves what the measure of success is and working backwards. We saw a record number of deaths last year that coincided with new strategies that led to more arrests. We're on track to surpass that this year. And so if you're saying that the more arrests are more successful, then it'll look successful. But if what we want is fewer neighbors dead on our streets, then we're not succeeding. And so we need, as an entire system, from the board of supervisors on down, to consider other approaches, because what we're doing isn't working.
Can I mention just one thing that Prop F is going to make possible is a funding stream, because there's a cap treatment fund that this is going to create basically as a baseline for any dollars that are saved through the implementation of Prop F. There will be funding for that. And it ties into something that I have actually been working on for, well, the better part of a year. It is a little bit more of a carrot than a stick that Prop F was. But it's based on a contingency management strategy that rewards people for negative drug tests. So it will be a voluntary program for the care not cash population. I'm hoping to announce this in the next couple of weeks, but I think it is a companion to Prop F that will give people an incentive to seek recovery and sobriety using proven strategies of contingency management that the medical literature say are very successful. So we'll have a funding stream to be able to do that.
I want to go back to something that Commissioner Benedicto just said right now, talking sort of about the metrics for success. There's been a lot of talk lately about making San Francisco safer, and I know this is one of your biggest issues as a supervisor. So I was wondering, you know, in your vision for a transformed San Francisco, what does that look like, and how can we measure that, right? Is it going to be a drop in crime stats? Because, you know, the fears of rising crime have not always been borne out in rising crime stats. So how can your voters hold you accountable?
I would say that there's a lot of metrics, but the most important one morally is just saving lives. Right now that we are seeing a loss of life because of drugs that is unlike anything we have experienced since the AIDS crisis. And it's not that far away from where the AIDS crisis was when we're talking about the losses of life. I think, you know, we can talk about these issues and what's going to solve them or not, but I think the more prudent discussion is whether we're going to be making progress. I think the reality is we don't know what new drugs are going to be coming down the pike. What I would hope for, the success that I would look for, is to see whether and to what extent we are doing what some European cities have done around drug policy, which is a 4 pillars approach at prevention, treatment, harm reduction, enforcement. And I think there is a way to do this that really does not fit comfortably in any ideological way. It makes everybody uncomfortable, and there's a process that a lot of cities have gone through, including our sister city, Zurich, where we had some conversations last year with some folks from Zurich about ways where there's police officers and nurses, and in many ways they're very permissive on drug policy, but when it comes to public nuisance, they're not. Some of their interventions are very public health led, but they're also quite coercive. So I think there is a way that we can measure success, but we've got to go through this sort of difficult political conversation. In many ways, I've always felt that what San Francisco is going through as far as its drug crisis goes isn't different than what a family goes through when they are dealing with someone who is struggling with addiction. There is a point where you realize that tough love is the only love there is, and that anything that we're doing to enable deadly behavior is not doing addicts any favors.
And Supervisor Dorsey, we haven't talked about Prop B, so it was defeated.
Manny wants to talk to you. Where is he?
Can he talk to me after this? I'm covering this.
I think he wants to talk to you about that.
About covering this?
Yes.
Give me your name again. I missed
Luis.
it. Manny wants to talk to me about covering an event, and I'm going to press. That's interesting. What you want to do is get my camera out of there, right? It's not you, it's Manny. Manny's afraid of the cops.
It's people feel uncomfortable that you're filming them. They don't mind you filming the event, but when you do this, they feel uncomfortable. Does that make sense? When you put a camera on somebody and you don't know who
I think I'm anti-cop, and you guys are all pro-cops, so you want my camera out of here.
No.
I'm going to walk back in here. You can get me a... Tell Manny to come and talk to me.
Yes. He's the one that told me to. Like, he's coming.
Where is he?
I don't know, but he's on his way.
The charter was amended in 2020 to require the chief of police to go through the process of making a recommendation of how many police officers we needed, and then nothing would happen. Basically, we removed through a charter amendment in 2020 the minimum staffing level, and when that happened, we went off a cliff. Where we are right now is about 1,500 police officers. We are well below the staffing level.
Was that because of the staffing level, though, or was that
I think
because
it's a
of
combination. I would say it's a combination.
There's a lot of officers who've been retiring.
I can
hired
guarantee
in the 90s.
there would be a court order right now compelling the city. It would be the POA or a citizens group. There was a law in the city that we would be so out of compliance with that it would be worth suing the city to get there. And right now we just don't have a minimum staffing level. So that was why I felt it was important to do it. And to give voters agency, because it's their dollars, to say in an election, I want to prioritize this, and Board of Supervisors, you figure out where you make the cuts, but this is our money and we need a fully staffed police department. I represent a downtown district that includes the convention center and the hotels and Warriors and Giants, and I can just say with some authority, we can't afford economically to not solve our police staffing crisis. That's why I wanted to go to voters with it. We ultimately got this, it ended up being sort of political gamesmanship at the end, that the only way this could happen is if voters enacted a new tax. It ended up being kind of a strange bedfellows kind of thing where it was me, the Chamber of Commerce, and League of Pissed Off Voters stood united against Prop 3, and I was grateful for the outcome. But it was a strange bedfellow. It was City Hall tricks that I'm very glad voters rejected, because there was a lot of confusion around this early.
I think that, I don't want to speak for anyone, but I believe that at least the three of you would agree that San Francisco needs more police officers. And I'm curious, Joel, if you think that San Francisco needs more officers.
I actually don't. And the reason is this, right? And if everyone could just indulge me for like a second. If everyone could close your eyes for a minute, right? No, I'm not even doing anything today. No, I'm serious though. If everyone could just close their eyes for a second. And when you think about the safest neighborhood you've ever lived in or you know of, right? What do you see when you're in that neighborhood? What kind of houses, parks, schools? What are the things that you see? What are the things that make you feel like I'm in a safe neighborhood? I feel good to live here, to work here, right? Think about those things. Or you can open your eyes. Did anyone, in what you think of like, I live in a safe, good neighborhood, see police cars every 2-3 blocks?
No.
So what did you see? Like just spitball what you saw.
Doors, businesses.
Doors, businesses, what else? What? The cops. What else?
Lots of people walking.
Right. So like, I'm just going through this exercise because when we think of like good, safe neighborhoods, you think of like parks. You can walk around the neighborhood safely without feeling like someone's gonna come rob me, right? You don't feel like your car is gonna get broken into. You know that there are good schools, right? That's why lots of parents want their kids in good schools. You think of like when my kid goes through his high school experience, that they have a shot at getting into a good college, that they have a shot at getting gainful employment, right? It's actually a marker of unsafe neighborhood when you're walking around and you see police sirens and flashing everywhere or things of that sort, right? So when we're talking about like, do we need more cops or not? If the question is driven by, do we need the cops to have safe neighborhoods, right? What creates safe neighborhoods, right?
Well, I think I would let Chief Scott respond, but in the interest of brevity, I think the opponent's argument would be that studies in San Francisco have shown, based on calls for service, that San Francisco needs more officers. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but response times, at least in some areas, have fallen. SFPD doesn't have the staffing it needs to respond to certain calls. Chief Scott, what? So, how do we solve that problem? Because my understanding is that your department actually has a number of unfilled funded positions that are already, they're funded, they're just not filled. So is this a problem that money can solve, or is there something more going on there?
Money helps. It does. I mean, competitive salaries, the Bay Area in general is very expensive, as we all know, we all live here. But it does help. But it's more complex than that. I mean, we also had to turn around some of the narrative of policing, particularly over the last 3 years, that has driven a lot of people out of the industry and kept a lot of people from applying. 2020, 21, we had people in the process or in the academy that once everything exploded after the murder of George Floyd, just walked away. We had people that had been in the department, like, I'm done, you know, I just want to do something different. So those things are turning around for us. We have more applications than we've had since 2017. We have lateral officers wanting to come to this department from other departments. So those things are turning around. But it's not a simple answer, because I do think also we have to make our city a city where people want to come and work. I mean, look, this is one thing that I have experienced here, because I left a good place to come here. I wanted to work here. There are things that this city offers, opportunities that this city offers, and there's a magic about the city when you don't live here. It attracted me here, so I know it can be done. So I think it's a little bit more complex than that. And if I could just say, you know, with the example that you just gave, you know, when I keep my eyes closed longer, what I see is, you know, what I've experienced, that there are some neighborhoods where without police and community working together, they're not ever going to be safe, in my opinion. And I've seen transformations in neighborhoods in this city, because it's not just police. We have to work with all of you all. And it can happen. It's happened in this city. It happened in the city that I used to work in, and it can be done. And those neighborhoods have transformed. So I do, yeah, there are neighborhoods that are just going to be safe because of the nature of what those neighborhoods are. But there are other neighborhoods that are struggling, and I don't think, in my professional opinion, that some of those transformations would happen if there weren't police officers in those neighborhoods, walking the beats, working with communities, We have some challenges in the city, and if we don't do it together, it's not going to get done.
I think I'd like to open it up to questions, but just one more question for me for Commissioner Benedicto. Chief Scott is talking about how sort of the reputation of policing has made it hard to attract officers. And I'm wondering if you think the Police Commission, with its sort of questioning of Chief Scott and its criticisms of the police department, has sort of contributed to, you know, why it's so hard to attract officers in San Francisco. And also, if you think there's anything the Police Commission can do to sort of repair its relationship with officers.
Absolutely, it's a great question. I mean, I do reject the premise that strict scrutiny is something that, you know, you shouldn't do in the hopes that it'll increase recruitment. I think that accountability requires tough conversations, and Chief Scott and I have tough conversations, but it also requires you know, praise when things go well. I'll be attending the CIT Awards in a couple of weeks, so I think that it is striking a balance, but I don't believe we have to trade accountability for recruitment or public safety for accountability. I think that's a false choice that gets presented to us. I think that the Commission can do things to improve the perception of that. I think what Supervisor Dorsey is right. I personally have attended every Academy graduation since I've been sworn in on the Commission to make sure that the Academy graduates see that the Commission supports them. I think that there needs to be more of that. I know Commissioner Walker had to leave, but she and I are going on a ride-along in a couple of weeks on the midnight shift. I think there are things that can be done, but I don't think at the expense of accountability and of the important safeguards that San Franciscans have put on the department and progress made by the department. I also think that, to get to like a broader point, I know we're going to go to the public soon, that's what's so frustrating to me about a bunch of the proposals we've discussed, is that we're not addressing the real problems we have. We're addressing fears about public safety with things that are not panaceas, but are just sort of the answer to the fact that we're hundreds of officers down is to allow more chases. Like, it doesn't connect one to one. And it seems to me, we had a recent hearing about civilianization. Like, either our staffing crisis is an emergency and it's like World War II mobilization, and we need to be changing the fundamental structure of the department and asking big questions like airport deployment, or asking questions about why there are 6 officers in the media relations unit. Maybe that could be flipped to be, instead of being a few civilians and more officers, to really say all hands on deck. And maybe those should be the proposals that are put on the ballot instead of ones that aren't addressing those. And when we've asked, we had a hearing on civilianization from the chief, and I think we admitted it's moving too slowly. And I know the chief is committed to civilianizing a lot of positions. So either this is an emergency of historic proportions and we should be acting accordingly, or it's something we can change around the edges with policies that reduce accountability and are on surveillance. And it just seems to me that there's a disconnect between the real fears people have and what we're trying to do to solve them, which is what I found frustrating about some of these initiatives.
Just to add a quick point about some of the narrative challenges that are being a challenge for recruitment. What we're really talking about is that cops used to be able to beat and kill people and get away with it, and they can't do that anymore because they're being caught on cameras and because there are body cams that are exposing that, right? And even when the legal systems are failing at holding them accountable, right, there's an appropriate amount of public outrage that they're under scrutiny, right? And that is not something to trade so that you can have more cops on the department. The second piece is that I think around the call to services, we should ask what are the cops responding to, right? If it's a mental health related call for service, we should not be asking cops to respond to those things. There should be mental health like professionals who should respond to that, because when the cops respond to some of these calls, like in the case of Sean Moore, who was diagnosed and had a mental health like illness, they end up shooting that person, right? I know we're talking about San Francisco, but in San Jose there was a report that the majority of people who were shot by cops happen to be mentally ill, right? So why are we even asking cops to be both cops and mental health like professionals and a bunch of other things that they're simply not equipped to do, and we should farm that out to the appropriate professionals to respond.
And I think the police union would agree with you on that as well. So, okay, I think we're ready to open up to questions.
So, I'm going to take that mic and then
Sure.
So before we go.
Just following up on what Michael asked earlier about data, in the next 2 years from now, what would you consider in a metric a success in terms of the result of increased police chases or things like that? What numbers are you looking for in terms of reduction and for Proposition F? What are your expectations, again, in terms of numbers, so that you actually can be held accountable to the success of these propositions?
So, in terms of metrics, so the number of police chases. First of all, Michael, I know the standard did their piece on chases and the crashes. You know, if we have tools to reduce the number of crashes, some things will be on our control, but that's a metric. How effective are we? How many chases end up in the capture? Because here's the thing I didn't mention. You know, we're a major city, one of, I think, number 14 in the country, or somewhere around there. We don't have helicopters. We don't have so many tools that so many other departments have, and having used those types of tools, it takes the pressure off. If you're chasing somebody and you have a helicopter to set up a perimeter, you have the eye in the sky, trust me on this one, it takes a lot of the pressure off. It doesn't alleviate the risk of a pursuit, but it allows you to do other things. Our officers, if they lose eye contact, the chase is pretty much done anyway. So some of the features in what we will be able to do, at least with equipment. We're not gonna get a helicopter, I'll tell you that right now, because it's not in the cars, but you know, having a drone at the end of a pursuit where you can actually search for a person, it's a lot more effective. So one of the metrics is how effective are we? You know, if we're gonna be putting people at risk in pursuits, what's the outcome? You know, are we having more crashes? One of the things that this measure calls for, and this is a good thing, is we have to report to the commission on all of these. How many pursuits? What was the cause of it? The initiation of it? How many ends and chases? Crashes, all these things. So we will have now at least a standardized reporting mechanism to measure these things. And the other thing I'll say just real quickly, because I didn't want to jump in this earlier, but or jump back at this. You know, with what we're doing with trying to disrupt the drug market, it cannot be a single metric, in my opinion. Yes, overdose death is very, very important, but there are so many other things that we have to account for and measure. So many of the emails and calls that I get is not about the overdose, it's about I can't even walk out of my door without stepping over somebody who's been over on fentanyl, or without having a pack of drug dealers in front of my building. So that's a metric that we have to measure, because if we're not cleaning that up, police and as a community, shame on us, you know? So it's not just the overdose. There are so many things that go into this equation that I want to make sure that we don't lose sight. Overdoses are critically important, but there are other things that we get judged by, particularly the police department, that aren't overdoses, and we have to account for those things. So breaking up this drug market is really important to a lot of people, and for some people it's not all about the overdoses, there are other metrics.
So on the chases issue, I think what I heard you say is that if you all get drones, we should expect to see the apprehension rate go up for the police department.
It gives us a better opportunity because
one of our findings was that the apprehension rate was quite low compared to other jurisdictions.
It does give us a better opportunity. You know, when you have that type of support, air support, it does a lot in terms of being able to detect where people are hiding and that type of thing. So I think it does. I think you will see an improvement there once we get going and we get to that.
Anybody else? Chief Lazar.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Assistant Chief Lazar. Just want to make two quick comments. Well, thank you, Chief, for sitting in the seat tonight and doing such a great job. This was supposed to be me, but I'm here. He did a great job. I want to make two comments. One about the pursuits. You know, today there was a murder in our city, and it was a really brutal stabbing, and we chased the suspect, and we lost sight of him. And we chased him to the East Bay, but we asked the Highway Patrol for their helicopter. There was no way we would have captured him in Oakland at the end of this chase without the helicopter, because we lost sight and CHP helped us out. So that's the kind of support we need. I just want to say one thing, because what I'm not hearing in the conversation in terms of policing and what our role is, I heard some broad brush stuff about cops, but like I see Julie Tron sitting here, and I don't mean to point to Julie. Julie has done a lot for our department in reform, and one of the things she and I worked on together was community policing. And I think, Julie, we have the best model for community policing in the country, because we couldn't find a policy as good as the one that we put together. And what that means is that when you have more police walking, talking, engaging, you build better relationships. And with the shortage of police, you have cops driving up and down the street with their windows up, with their sirens on, going from call to call, and there's a big disconnect. So the increase in more police for the chief and I mean more officers out in the community, engaging, building relationships, building trust, and working with folks that want to work with us. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
I think as long as David got up, and I feel compelled to ask you to confirm that the chase for the murder today was under our existing pursuit policy, correct?
It was under our existing pursuit policy. It was a violent felony, yes. And to clarify the other comments, let's be clear about what Prop E is. It's all felonies and it's violent misdemeanors. And to the chief's point, when the reason for apprehension is clearly outweighed by the risk of harm to the public, that chase will not be initiated, nor will it continue. It will be canceled. We will train our people to it. Our policy will be clear about it. And there's a difference between a burglary in the middle of the night in a warehouse district versus a burglary in the daytime in a school district. And we're very clear about that, and we're going to be very mindful of that.
David, if I can ask you while you're up. So then,
well, I just sat down.
David's really regretting.
What's a violent misdemeanor? Like, what are the list of crimes you're defining as violent misdemeanor?
Oh, violent misdemeanor is a couple of simple examples. If somebody came in here tonight and punched somebody in the face and walked out, that is a violent misdemeanor. The trauma won't be such that it may lead to a felony. It's a misdemeanor battery. That's a violent misdemeanor. A man slaps his wife. It may be not resulting in traumatic injury, meaning a felony, but it's a misdemeanor. We're going to go and pursue that person. Again, using common sense about risking the public in this pursuit. That's important for everyone here to know about that. Thank you.
That's all we talked about.
Question about Prop F. If the city does not have, or our addiction medicine system does not actually have enough beds and treatment facilities available for all 5,000 of the general assistance population, assuming that they all say, yes, I want treatment, then is the passage really kind of meaningless? And even if there were the capacity, does that crowd out people who are not on general assistance, who may have more willingness to participate in treatment than somebody who is essentially, yes, being coerced by having their general assistance cut off unless they say yes that they are accepting treatment?
So I'm satisfied with that it is written in a way that isn't going to be punitive and that will give people opportunities to avail themselves of services if they need it and if they're there. I do think that it's a step in the right direction. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have written it the way the mayor's team did. I have opinions on it. I think I would have done something closer to what I'm going to be legislating and announcing in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But I do think the more interventions we can have with people who are at wildly disproportionate risk for substance use disorder and also overdose. One of the things that I would say about what we're dealing with right now is you don't even need to be diagnosed with a substance use disorder to die of a drug overdose, given the lethality of the things that are out there. So it's not a panacea. There's not going to be panaceas on drug policy in this era, unfortunately, but I think we can make progress in the right direction.
If I could just add one thing, since you all got us all to imagine a world, I'd like to do the same. You know, Supervisor Dorsey pointed out rightly that this is the greatest public health crisis we've faced since the AIDS crisis. We didn't solve the AIDS crisis by coercing people out of the AIDS crisis. We didn't solve the AIDS crisis. We did it by education, by public health care, by strategic interventions, and by medical research. It wasn't through whatever the equivalent is of Prop F. That was what the Reagan administration tried to end us out of the AIDS crisis, which didn't get us out of there. And so I think if you think back to what's worked in the past and what hasn't, that's what got us out of the AIDS crisis. And that comprehensive approach is what's going to get us out of this crisis.
Drug dealing is an actual crime.
It is.
And using drugs is an actual crime. This is the analogy to the AIDS crisis was simply the loss of life. There really isn't. The analogy breaks down there, so I don't think it's valid to say we did this in the AIDS crisis. And
I don't think it's one-to-one.
And also, I think it's important that we normalize what we're doing in San Francisco, in the city and county of San Francisco, with what other counties are doing. This is part of the thing that I think is important around Prop F, but it's also important around Prop E and surveillance. But it's also important